Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
7:07 Wednesday morning. It's the 21st day of May, and it's a busy day on Capitol Hill. It's a busy day in the media with continued revelations about what the Biden White House knew and when they lied about it. We'll get to all of that coming up, and what could be sort of, a swan song for Jake Tapper's illustrious career, as I really don't know how he buys his credibility back, although he's selling a lot of books, so if there is a price for his credibility, he will be able to afford it. Coming up at 7:35, Ed Martin, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, 8:35, Representative Jim Jordan, Chairman of the Judiciary Committee. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
I will say it again, because I've said it often, because unlike Jake Tapper, I like letting you know when I get something wrong, and I got this wrong. I expressed reservations about Marco Rubio, Senator of Florida, as our Secretary of State. Partly because I'm just such a huge fan of Rick Grinnell, and he was, sure. And I was transparent about that. I had a personal interest because I do consider him a friend. I really thought that he was best qualified to be Secretary of State with all of his international work, working with the UN during the Bush administration, working as our ambassador to Germany. That's water under the bridge. Marco Rubio got the nomination, and I am thrilled to tell you how wrong I was. He has been an absolute rock star as our Secretary of State. And yesterday he displayed it beautifully, especially for people who live in this area, because he had a confrontation while giving testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with two of the illustrious senators from the Washington, D.C. region, Senator Chris Van Hollen and Senator Tim Kaine. Let's start with Kaine, as he raised grave concerns over the admittance of the South African refugees who are fleeing literally racial persecution in their country. It's actually one of the legal ways you can seek asylum in this country and get refugee status is if your government in your home country is persecuting you due to your race. That is asylum status right there. It's the golden ticket for refugee status. If you're coming to America to have a better economic condition or get a better job so you can make more money, that ain't asylum status, baby. I'm sorry. Get in line like everyone else who wants to come to this country for a better economic situation. But your government's persecuting you because of the color of your skin, you're going to get that refugee status. That's exactly what these South African residents achieved when they petitioned legally in their country instead of entering here illegally and then claiming asylum after the fact. And Tim Kaine doesn't like that. So here's the exchange now with Secretary of State Rubio. Cut 20.
But I'm going to ask you, so a well-justified fear of persecution?
Yeah, they thought that their farms were being burned down and they would be killed. I think that's a pretty good justification for wanting to come. They're afraid for their lives.
And should it be applied in an even-handed way? That's an easy
No, our foreign policy doesn't require even-handedness. It requires prioritizing the interests of the United States.
The phrase says you are entitled to entrance as a refugee if you demonstrate a well-justified fear of persecution.
No, you're not entitled.
So
you're
can
allowed.
You have a different standard based upon the color of somebody's skin? Would that be acceptable?
Well, I'm not the one arguing that. Apparently you are, because you don't like the fact that they're white, and that's why they're coming.
I'm just asking you to say that would be unacceptable.
Well, no,
I
would say that the United States...
a very easy thing
The United
to say.
States has a right to pick and choose who they allow into the United States.
Even based on the color of somebody's skin.
You're the one that's talking about the color of their skin, not me. These
are
people whose farms were being burned down and they were killed because of the color of their skin. Well, you've demonstrated enough because you think anyone should be allowed into this country for any reason because they met a certain criteria.
Who has said that?
We are going to prioritize people that come into our country on the basis of what's in the interest of this country. That's a small number of people that are coming.
But you said this weekend that there would be more.
But in other cases, it's harder to vet. In other cases, it's more difficult. And by the way, the United States admits people every year.
That was great. And by the way, turned the racial thing back onto Tim Kaine. Don't put words in my mouth. You're the one who's obsessed with race, pal.
That's right.
But then we turned to Chris Van Hollen. Chris Van Hollen went on a 7-minute diatribe about immigration policies, of course, because he's defending Mr. Maryland man, right?
Right.
And he ended his rant with this, cut 21.
I have to tell you directly and personally that I regret voting for you for Secretary of State. I yield back.
May I respond?
You may sit.
Well, first of all, your regret for voting for me confirms I'm doing a good job. based on what I know.
Well, that's just a flippant statement, Mr. Secretary.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
I didn't ask.
Senator, please let the Secretary
I'd be happy to, but then I can respond to his.
Your time's up, Senator, and willfully used, I might add.
Who was that chairman? That was beautiful.
I don't know. It was beautiful. But that is just, it's so funny because, he comes back with this, your regret for voting for me confirms I'm doing a good job. You could tell Van Hollen thought he had the mic drop there with I regret voting for you. And then Rubio just slams him. He comes back, that's just flip it. Which is basically what my dad used to say to me. Don't be flippant.
Rubio.
Don't be
so
flippant
good.
with me.
Rubio, basically, it's like, let me just tell you something. If Chris Van Hollen approves of my job, then I'm doing something wrong. It's just so beautiful. But he wasn't done. He then went on and specifically started talking about USAID because everyone's upset about, their little slush fund not being able to stay. Cut 22. Let's go.
Your remarks do not represent the view of this committee.
Well, Mr.
Secretary, please.
Well, I'd like to. I can't respond to everything he said because much of these are untrue, but I'll go through a few. First of all, I'm actually very proud of the work we've done with USAID. For example, I don't regret cutting $10 million for male circumcisions in Mozambique. I don't know how that makes us stronger and more prosperous as a nation. I don't regret psychosocial support services.
I raised Sudan, Mr. Secretary.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman,
Senator, I'd ask you to suspend. You had 7 straight minutes.
I chose to use my time that way, Mr. Chairman. That's my right to
Please
use
suspend
my time that way.
Secretary Rubio.
Well, I can go on. I mean, there's other things here. We spent $227,000 for Big Cat's YouTube channel from USAID. We spent $14 million for social cohesion in Mali, whatever the hell that means. So I can go on and on. I got the list here, and there's more. I didn't even bring the whole list. In the case of El Salvador, absolutely. Absolutely. We deported gang members, including the one you had a margarita with. And that guy is a human trafficker, and that guy is a gangbanger, and the evidence is going to be clear. In the days to come, you're going to see who you went to defend.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Rubio has the floor.
Mr. Chairman, he can't make unsubstantiated comments like that.
Secretary Rubio has the floor.
Secretary Rubio should take that testimony to the federal court of the United States.
I love that Van Hollen is it's his whole career.
I love the margarita line, the one you had a margarita with. And by the way, that was Chairman Jim Risch from Idaho.
Oh, good job, Chairman. And
yes.
Everyone has said, what will the Republican Party look like after it's Trumpified, after Donald Trump
this
leaves?
Looks pretty good.
This is what it looks like. This is a Marco Rubio I can get behind, not the Marco Rubio of 10 years ago.
And Larry, do you remember the sort of the Romney Republicans, the Bush, the politeness, sir, let me just answer that, if I can just, if you don't mind, if I could just answer that. Oh, those days were frustrating.
Absolutely. All right, we've got more of this. Rubio was great yesterday, and most of it was geared toward Chris Van Hollen, who has continued to be clown himself on a daily basis on behalf of the good people of Maryland. We'll give you those details in just a moment.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right, let's continue now. Marco Rubio with Chris Van Hollen. Let's get to cut number 23 here. With regard to this is hilarious when they're talking about the judges trying to intervene with foreign policy, and Rubio nails it. Go ahead.
Because he hasn't done it under oath.
Here's another point, okay? There is a division in our government between the federal branch and the judicial branch. No judge in the judicial branch cannot tell me or the president how to conduct foreign policy. No judge can tell me how I have to outreach to a foreign partner or what I need to say to them. And if I do reach to that foreign partner and talk to them, I have under no obligation to share that with the judiciary branch. Just like a judge cannot order me to negotiate with a foreign minister of Russia, they cannot order me to negotiate with a foreign minister or the president of El Salvador. And if I did negotiate with them, which we have responded to them, and we've told them, we've had communications with the president of El Salvador, I am under no obligation, under our division of powers in this country, and to share with the judicial branch how I conducted diplomacy of the United States. It would actually be counterproductive. If I started sharing with courts, or frankly, with the media, my conversations with foreign leaders and all of their details, no foreign leader would talk to me again, and we would break trust with them. So I have complied with every court order. What I won't comply with is an order to disclose what I'm saying and what we're talking about with a foreign leader, because then they won't talk to me. Diplomacy doesn't work that way.
Absolutely brilliant and correct and logical, and anyone who thinks about it knows that. And as Secretary of State, he's really come into his own. Okay, there's also, this is a remarkable moment here when asked about USAID and spending. Everyone's screaming about Doge, and they do want their slush fund, right?
Yeah,
they want to be able to spend all their money at USAID. Yep. Well, Marco Rubio revealed something amazing as he has now taken over what's left of USAID, and he found something about the spending there.
I will say this, even with the reforms we put in place and what we're suggesting is changes to our foreign aid, we still will provide more foreign aid, more humanitarian support than the next 10 countries combined, than the entire OECD, and far more than China. China doesn't do humanitarian aid. China does predatory lending. That's what Belt and Road Initiative is. That's what all of their aid. They have zero record of doing humanitarian aid in the world. And frankly, they don't know how to do it. They have no interest in doing it. What they're very good at is going into some country, making you a loan, and then holding that debt over your head. And that's what they continue doing. By the way, you have to hire a Chinese company to do it. So I don't agree with this assessment that there's no evidence whatsoever that China has either the capacity or the will to replace the U.S. in humanitarian assistance, in food deliveries, or in developmental assistance for that matter. We provide development assistance. They provide debt traps. And that's a point over and over again around the world that we've made, and we found receptive audiences to it. Now, look, anytime you undertake reforms of this magnitude that needed to be made, you're going to have hiccups, and you're also going to have controversy. But these reforms had to happen. At USAID, 12 cents of every dollar was reaching the recipient. That means that in order for us to get aid to somebody, we had to spend all this other money supporting this foreign aid industrial complex.
Did you hear that? 12 cents from every dollar spent through USAID went to the recipients. The other 88 cents went to all the NGOs, went to all the bureaucrats, went to all the people. And let's be clear, most of these NGOs end up being staffed with Democrats who used to work in the White House, who get phased out for a few years, waiting for the next administration. They're all full of Obama people. Or Biden people. Or
it's funneled in some ways to Hamas and other terrorist organizations. I mean, that is what's even scarier. I mean, it's scary enough that it's going to the Democrats. But again, I used to work for the American Red Cross, and there was this thing called a charity rater, which would rate charities of how much, if you give $1, how much of that dollar actually gets to let's say the dogs in the pound, or the poor person, or whatever. And charities really got dinged. Like it was pretty clear. Charities went out of business if the majority of that money didn't get. And we don't apply that to foreign aid. We don't apply that same principle and those standards to foreign aid. No, because it's taxpayer dollars, and it's just fine. It's just fine if it gets wasted left and right. We need to change the culture of taxpayer dollars and treat them like we treat people's private money.
Yeah, because it's our money.
It is.
Rubio had all the facts at his disposal. He was fantastic. He pushed back. He fought back. He didn't take any crap.
Yep.
He was fantastic. And one other thing about USAID, that's an extraordinary thing that should get more attention, that 88 cents of every dollar goes to the infrastructure and never actually makes it to the aid that they say they're giving. But we also learned under the Biden administration that a lot of that USAID money that's supposed to go to foreign countries and NGOs, that money was then turned back around to influence things in this country and to use for censorship purposes and to influence political operatives in this country. That's another Biden scandal that needs further explanation. 722.
Making sense of your world.
I can't believe this.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
And I am so with you.
Making sense of the news. WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington. A Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:37. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on a super busy day in the nation's capital with Congress trying to hammer out that big tax cut bill that I really wish they'd stop calling a big, beautiful bill, because a big, beautiful bill sounds like they're about to take money from your pocket. This bill is going to return money to your pocket. It's a tax cut. That's going on, plus a whole lot else as we continue to learn about Joe Biden's debilitating behavior in the White House. 8:35, we'll talk to Jim Jordan about all those things. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Ed Martin had been our U.S. attorney here in the District of Columbia until the odious Tom Tillis decided to withdraw his support from his nomination. But frankly, I think that he's got even more influence in his new job with the Justice Department, or multiple jobs. And he joins us now. Ed, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Larry and Julie. I enjoy your program, so nice to be on with you.
You know, I don't want to rehash old news, but I know you've been doing a couple of interviews. I haven't heard you address this directly in terms of the frame, the way I want to frame it with regard to Tom Tillis. Because Tillis specifically said that it was your opinion and position on January 6th that sort of kept him from throwing support to your confirmation. And here's what's weird to me. The president pardoned everybody involved with January 6th, so it's a non-issue. You would not have been dealing with any of those people, except you vowed to try to get to the bottom of that office's behavior, tactics, and whether there was any sort of inappropriate use of the Justice Department or the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. with regard to those prosecutions. Do you believe that's what Senator Tillis was trying to keep you from doing? Is that what he meant when he said January 6th was the problem?
Well, you know, Larry, we had about an hour and a half meeting. I think it was a Monday evening right before this sort of all fell apart. And he ranted and raved. You know, it was about a lot of us there. It was former Senator Norm Coleman, who was sort of helping me in the process, was there, or a couple other people. And he ranted and raved on this subject of January 6th. But he finished the meeting saying, you know, I'm not sure I'll vote for you, but I'll let you proceed. And then he changed his mind a few hours later. It's never been clear to me when he said publicly, I'll vote for Ed Martin for any other U.S. attorney in the country, but just not D.C. Exactly why. You actually may be giving me more insight. Maybe you're right that they're afraid, because I did have an investigation ongoing in the office, and frankly, I have it still because as weaponization leader of the working group, January 6th is one of our dockets. So I don't really know. There were a lot of forces. You know, I respect the process, the Constitution. Senators can do this, and I don't think they really have to make it clear, and they didn't. And so, you know, as President Trump said, we could have fought. I think I have the votes on the floor of the Senate if we get there, but I think it was not worth the fight. He's got a bill, as you mentioned, to pass and other things. And I saw the president 2 nights ago, and he, first time in person since this happened, and he said, I think you got a better spot now. You think so? And I said, I think so. And he said, good. He said, keep going. So, you know, that's if you're working for the president, that's about as good as it gets.
Listen, as someone who works in Washington, D.C. and reports on what goes on in this town and has done for, over a dozen years now, I wanted you in that office so we could return law and order and sensible prosecutions to the district. That said, I am thrilled with the gig that you did end up getting. And to that end, let's talk about the weaponization of the government. What are you focusing? What are your priorities right now in terms of what has happened in the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office of the District of Columbia over the course of the last 10 years?
Well, you know, it's like building a plane while you fly it. And when we came in, the working group was created about 2 months ago by Pam Bondi, and she gave us 6 or 7 priorities, including J6, including the lawfare against Trump and others, including the targeting of the Catholics by the FBI, the school board parents. So she gave us a laundry list of about 8 ones, and we've already been working on that. And we have some of the best folks in DOJ that have been kind of getting together saying, okay, what do we do about this? How do we dig to the bottom of that? And so that's the starting point. That includes Jack Smith, by the way, and what went on there. So it's all the Crossfire Hurricane, all the all-stars of what you would think of.
Oh, great.
But, you know, now I'm sort of building out the team and the vision for the team. And I met yesterday with Todd Blanche, and you know, we were talking about this, and he said, you know, you have to sort of quarterback the team and sort of assign out across the country the investigators and the prosecutors to look at these things, because it's all too much work. And that's the one thing I will say, Larry and Julie, you know, you guys are in the business of information. The thing I will warn people, one frustration you feel, and I feel it too, where's the cuffs and the prosecutions? And it takes longer than we want because of the way the system is, and that actually means we can't wait. You know, Larry, I didn't do a single interview with you, I don't think, while I was U.S. Attorney for 4 months, and that was a conscious decision. I was trying to keep my head down and grind. Now I want to be on the radio with you every day because I want to tell you what we're finding.
Let's do it.
I want to tell you. I know. I want to tell you what we're finding because the public is better served now to see it first and then understand why the prosecutions happened. The Biden administration weaponized government by just going after you. I think if you explain what you're doing and you lay it out, people will understand we're not going after Joe Biden's White House. We're going after the government being used against us or used improperly. So that's why it's a different posture and a different moment.
Well, you talk about information and the role of media like us and getting that information out, but part of weaponization was also deplatforming those people in the media who were telling the truth, unlike Jake Tapper, who now admits conservative media was correct. But there was, for instance, CISA, which is this government agency through DHS, worked with these private entities, these private platforming entities to deplatform conservative voices. Is this something that you'll be investigating? Because I know Tulsi Gabbard is involved in this. So what's the status of that?
Well, first of all, I met with Tulsi 4 days ago after I got in this spot because you're right. Tulsi's been knee-deep in this because what she sees is a lot of where that censorship happened. But, you know, the characteristic of these major scandals of weaponization, one characteristic is that if you spoke about it, they deplatformed you. If you think about it, COVID,
that's right.
If you talked about it, they deplatformed you. Election 2020, if you talked about it, they deplatformed you. The Russia hoax, you know, if you talked about January 6th, and so already I've had a couple of whistleblowers in with specific instances, major instances of how you can see the pressure from the government on the social media giants, on the carriers of cable, for example. And so, yes, we're going to get to the bottom of it. Yes, we're going to shine a light on it. If it is illegal, we're going to prosecute it. But we're also going to force it didn't stop. And so you still have to. And one thing that can happen is because I work for the Department of Justice and the government, can say what until now you guys couldn't say because you'd be sued into oblivion by Dominion. So I can say that the election systems are deeply, deeply flawed. They're not auditable, and they have to be checked. And that's because of the role I play. And by the way, I can investigate it, and we will. And so as you look at each of these key areas, the characteristic of being censored, if you talked about it, gives you an indication that something's wrong, and therefore it's part of the process to uncover what's going on.
Ed, I know you've been talking quite a bit, and I know you were on with my friend Mark Halperin's show yesterday talking about the auto pen and the use of the auto pen and whether there's legalities there. I want to connect that and your investigation into the pardons process with what I think actually is one great revelation from the Jake Tapper book. A lot of it is retread junk. But this is an amazing quote. One of the insiders at the White House said, and I'm quoting, 5 people were running the country, and Joe Biden was at best a senior member of the board. Ed, that I think deserves some investigation, wouldn't you think? Especially when it comes to legislation, pardons, executive orders. Yeah. I mean, even a Supreme Court justice nomination.
Yeah, look, there's a part of this that we're sort of getting a look under the hood, and it's probably always never too pretty, right? If you could go back in time and see who's really running things, it is what it is. But there's something about this that's really troubling. And I had a whistleblower in my office about 10 days ago. I mentioned this on Halperin's show that told me that the key people were Anita Dunn and Bob Bauer and Ron McClain, and they various times were outside of the government using access to the government. Now, this is a whistleblower, but using access to the government sort of as their entree to power and to wealth and influence. And that's where you get to something rubber hits the road. Like, auto pen is not illegal.
That's the oligarchy. I'm sorry, I've been told that they don't like oligarchies. That's literally an unelected body of people running this government.
Right. I was surprised because I said, well, what about like Susan Rice? The perception is Susan Rice, and he was like, no, that Ricchetti is also one of the ones. But the thing about this guy's applause is that, again, you cannot like it, and you can say people are dumb and lazy and stupid, all that, but that's not there's a political answer. You don't elect them or you impeach them or whatever. But there's a legal question here that's at the center of this because it's now clear he was not mentally competent. And I was only in office about 5 days at the U.S. Attorney's Office when I wrote a letter to a number of the key people at the top of the Biden White House saying, are you concerned? I have questions about the competence of Joe Biden and the validity of the pardons. Because what happened with the pardons, both in late December, and about the 23rd of December, and then again at the very end, was unprecedented scope and number of pardons and the scope of them, the length and all. It's unheard of. What's being lost in this is a lot of pardons at the end of a term happen, but this was different quality. And that makes you sit up and say, did somebody do something different? Did somebody get misled? And now he's incompetent. And now you say, okay, was somebody taking advantage in a way? Because back to the same conversation we had 5 minutes ago, the categories of people who got pardons coincide with what look like the major scandals that you were deplatformed for. So, COVID, there was a whole bunch of COVID pardons. There was a whole bunch of sort of crossfire hurricane pardons. And so now you look at it and say, was somebody other than the president doing something to protect themselves or others? I mean, it just raises questions. And again, the pardon power is plenary, but it's plenary for a competent president. And if the president's not competent, then you have a different set of problems that arise pretty quickly.
We got to leave it there. Ed Martin, again, the titles now. Director of the Weaponization Working Group, Associate Deputy Attorney General, and the Pardon Attorney. Frankly, you could get probably even more done than you would have in that great office of U.S. Attorney for D.C. I'll tell you one quick thing. Joe DeGenova is a guest on this show every Monday. The man is a genius, a warrior, a patriot. He held that office, as you know, and he sort of set the bar, I think, for U.S. attorneys to follow. I sure hope if you need extra help around the house, I know that Joe has forgotten more about this town.
I call him all the time, and every time he's on your program and he mentions my name, I get probably 30 texts where people listen to you and also him. That's really great. So I always tell him, say something nice on Monday morning. So thanks, Larry.
Go.
Thank you, Julie.
All
Talk to you soon.
We'll see what happens. Ed Martin, folks. It's 7:51. Coming up in our 8 o'clock hour, we're going to talk to Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Lots to come. Keep it here. It's O'Connor and Company with Larry and Julie.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news.